"Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," the officer said, his voice cutting through the hum of gas pumps and late afternoon traffic, sharp enough to turn heads but calm enough to sound routine, like this was just another stop on an ordinary day, except nothing about the moment felt ordinary, as Angela Brooks stood beside her car under the flickering canopy lights of a roadside gas station just off Highway 41. The smell of gasoline mixing with the distant scent of fried food from inside the convenience store, her fingers gently wrapped around a small white pharmacy box as if it carried more than just medicine, as if it carried time itself, and maybe it did because inside that box was something her mother needed before the night was over, something measured in milligrams but weighed in urgency. And yet here she was, being watched, being questioned, being slowly surrounded by authority that had already decided what it was looking at before anyone said a word. Officer Ryan Coles stood a few feet away, one hand resting near his radio, posture straight, expression fixed in that practiced neutrality that leaned just slightly toward suspicion, his partner lingering behind him, eyes scanning, assessing, confirming a silent agreement that had formed before Angela even spoke, before she could explain, before she could even breathe in fully, and still she didn't raise her voice, didn't step back, didn't argue. Because something in her had learned long ago that escalation wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, sometimes it was simply standing still while the world moved too fast around you. "I just paid inside," she said softly, her voice steady, not defensive, not afraid, just clear, like she believed clarity alone should be enough. But the air didn't shift, the tension didn't ease, and the eyes on her didn't soften, instead they narrowed slightly, as if her calmness itself was unexpected, maybe even unwelcome. A child near the next pump tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering something too quiet to hear but loud enough to be felt, a question hanging in the space between innocence and understanding. Angela glanced down for just a second, not at the officers, not at the growing attention, but at the box in her hand, her thumb brushing lightly over the printed label, the name, the dosage, the instructions, all the things that mattered far more than what was happening here, far more than the way the moment was unfolding around her. A breeze moved through the station, carrying the low hum of a passing pickup truck and the distant echo of a radio playing somewhere behind the counter. And for a brief second everything felt suspended, like time had stretched thin. Like the world was waiting to see what would happen next. Officer Cole took a small step closer, not aggressive, not rushed, just deliberate, as if closing a gap that didn't need closing, and Angela lifted her eyes to meet his, not with defiance, not with fear, but with something quieter, something steadier, something that didn't match the narrative forming in the air around them. "Please," she said, almost under her breath. "My mother needs this." And the words didn't echo, didn't rise, they simply existed there between them, fragile and firm at the same time, but no one moved to pick them up, no one reached for their meaning, and the moment held, stretched, waiting, as the late afternoon sun dipped just low enough to cast long shadows across the concrete, turning everything into outlines and silhouettes, as if even the light itself wasn't ready to reveal the full truth yet. Officer Cole's gaze lingered on Angela a second longer than before, not because she had changed, but because something about her refusal to match the tension around her began to feel unfamiliar, like a script that was no longer being followed the way he expected, and he glanced down at the small box in her hand again, this time more carefully, as if the details might finally align with the assumption he had already formed. But the label did not argue, it did not defend, it simply existed with quiet certainty, black print on white surface, clinical and precise, the kind of thing that did not carry emotion but carried consequence, and that contrast unsettled something he could not quite name. His partner shifted again, stepping half a pace closer, lowering his voice just enough to keep it between them. "We should run her name," he murmured, not urgent, not hesitant, just procedural, as if procedure itself was enough to justify the direction this moment was taking, and Cole gave a small nod, reaching for his radio, the movements smooth, practiced, something he had done countless times before, but this time the air felt different, heavier, like the sound of his own voice might carry further than he intended. "Dispatch, I need a name check," he said, his tone steady, controlled, and Angela watched the motion without reacting, her eyes not fixed on the radio, not on the officers, but somewhere just beyond them, as if she could already see the outcome of this moment and was simply waiting for it to arrive. The radio responded with a burst of static before a voice came through, clear but distant, asking for the name, and for a brief second there was silence, a pause that stretched just long enough to feel intentional. As if even that question carried weight, Angela shifted her grip slightly, adjusting the box in her hand, not to hide it, not to present it, but to hold it more securely, anchoring herself again to its purpose. "Angela Brooks," she said, her voice even, unshaken, and the name seemed to settle into the space around them differently than her previous words had, as if it carried something unspoken with it, something that did not need explanation but had not yet been recognized. Cole repeated the name into the radio, each syllable clear, deliberate, and then the waiting began, the kind of waiting that filled itself with small details, the distant beep of a fuel pump resetting, the soft hiss of air from a tire being checked 2 pumps over, the faint rustle of wind moving across the asphalt, and in that waiting Angela remained exactly as she was, her posture unchanged, her expression steady, not defiant, not submissive, simply present, and for the first time Cole noticed it fully. The absence of fear, the absence of urgency, the absence of anything that suggested she believed this situation would end differently than it should, and that absence created its own kind of tension, one that did not come from raised voices or sudden movement but from the quiet realization that something might not align the way he expected. The radio crackled again, a voice returning with partial information, clipped, routine, but then pausing mid-sentence, as if something on the other end had interrupted the flow, and Cole's brow tightened slightly, not in confusion yet, but in anticipation of it, the pause stretching just long enough to be noticed, and Angela's eyes lifted just a fraction. Not toward the officer, not toward the radio, but toward the horizon where the last line of sunlight hovered before slipping away, and in that fading light her calm did not waver, it settled deeper, as if she had already stepped beyond this moment, while everyone else was still trying to understand it. The tone that followed through the radio was not the same voice that had been speaking before, it carried a different weight, measured, deliberate, the kind of voice that did not belong to routine dispatch chatter but to someone who expected to be heard without repetition. And Officer Cole instinctively straightened further, his hand tightening slightly around the device as he brought it closer. "Unit on Highway 41, confirm you are with subject Angela Brooks," the voice said each word, spaced with precision, and Cole answered immediately. "Affirmative." But the response that came back did not continue the normal sequence of questions or instructions. Instead there was a pause, longer than before, filled with a low background murmur as if multiple people were now involved on the other end, and that pause spread outward, touching everything around them, the quiet hum of the pumps, the distant movement of cars, even the small crowd that had formed at a careful distance, watching, without stepping in, and Angela felt the shift settle into the space like a change in pressure, subtle but undeniable, her fingers still wrapped around the box, her posture unchanged, her calm not breaking but deepening, as if she had already reached the still point at the center of the moment, while everything else circled around it. Officer Cole glanced briefly at his partner, a look that asked a question neither of them voiced. Because whatever was happening now was no longer something they controlled. The radio came alive again, the same voice returning but now sharper, clearer. "Stand by and do not proceed with any further action," it said, and the phrasing itself was unusual, not a suggestion, not a request, but a directive that landed with quiet authority, and Cole's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough to be seen if someone was looking closely, the certainty that had framed his earlier movements beginning to loosen, replaced by something more cautious, more attentive. "Copy," he replied, his tone steady but lower now, as if instinctively adjusting to the level of the voice speaking to him. And beside him his partner took a half-step back, not in retreat but in recognition that the situation had changed, that the invisible lines guiding their actions had just been redrawn. Angela lifted her gaze slightly, her eyes moving past the officers for just a moment, catching the reflection of flashing red and blue lights against the glass doors of the store, colors blending with the warm glow of the interior, creating a layered image that felt almost unreal, like a scene paused between two outcomes, and in that reflection she saw not herself but the stillness she carried, the quiet certainty that had not needed to announce itself. The radio crackled once more, and this time there was no hesitation, no background murmur, just a direct statement. "Do not engage further, higher command has been notified." And the word settled heavily into the space, not loud, not dramatic, but absolute, and for the first time since the moment began, Officer Cole did not immediately move, did not reach, did not speak. He simply stood there, processing, his eyes shifting back to Angela as if seeing her more clearly now, not as a situation, not as a problem to resolve, but as something he had not fully understood, and Angela met that look without resistance. Without triumph, her expression unchanged, her presence steady, as the balance of the moment tilted quietly, unmistakably, toward a truth that was no longer waiting to be discovered but was already beginning to unfold. Nothing moved for a moment after the last words came through the radio, not the officers, not the small crowd, not even the flickering light above them that seemed to hesitate before settling into a steady glow. And in that stillness Angela's breathing became the only rhythm she paid attention to, slow and even, the kind of breath that carried patience instead of fear, the kind that did not rush to meet the next moment but allowed it to arrive on its own. Her fingers relaxed slightly around the box, not loosening their hold but easing into it, as if the weight she had been carrying was no longer pressing against her in the same way. Officer Cole lowered the radio just a fraction, his eyes still on her. But now there was a question behind them, not spoken, not fully formed, just present, like a quiet shift in perspective that had not yet found its words. His partner glanced toward the patrol car, then back at Cole, uncertainty moving between them in small, almost invisible gestures, the kind that only existed when certainty had already begun to fade. A light breeze passed through the station again, lifting a loose receipt near the pump and carrying it a few feet across the pavement before letting it fall, a small, ordinary movement that somehow felt louder in the silence. Angela's gaze drifted for a brief second toward the horizon, where the last line of daylight had softened into a deep blue, the kind that signaled the end of one thing and the beginning of another. And she thought of her mother again, not with worry this time, but with a quiet reassurance, as if something inside her already knew that she would make it back in time, that this delay, as unexpected as it had been, would not define the outcome. The radio remained quiet now, no static, no instructions, just a held silence that felt intentional, as if something larger was moving into place beyond what could be seen, and Angela stood within it, not resisting, not reacting. Simply present, her calm no longer just a response but a space of its own, one that seemed to slow everything around it. Even the tension that had filled the moment earlier now felt distant, like an echo that had already begun to fade. Officer Cole shifted his stance, not stepping forward, not stepping back, just adjusting as if the ground beneath the situation had subtly changed, and for the first time he looked away from Angela, just briefly, scanning the surroundings as if searching for something that had not yet arrived, something that the radio had hinted at but had not explained. And when his gaze returned to her, it lingered differently, not with suspicion, not with authority, but with a quiet recognition that he was no longer fully in control of what was unfolding. Angela met that look without change, her expression steady, her presence grounded, and in that shared silence, something unspoken passed between them, not an agreement, not an apology, but an awareness that the moment had shifted beyond its original meaning, that what had begun as a simple assumption was now opening into something far more complex, far more revealing. And as the lights above cast a soft glow across the scene, the world seemed to pause just long enough for that realization to settle, to take shape, before the next movement, whatever it would be, arrived. The sound arrived before the sight of it, low at first, a distant vibration threading through the quiet like something approaching from far beyond the edges of the moment. And Officer Cole's head turned slightly, his eyes shifting toward the road that stretched past the gas station, the same road that moments ago had carried nothing more than passing traffic and fading daylight, but now held something different, something deliberate. The faint glow of headlights appearing in formation, not scattered, not random, but aligned with intention, and the atmosphere changed again, not abruptly, but with a slow, undeniable gravity, like the air itself was making room for what was coming. Angela did not turn immediately. She felt it first in the way the officer's posture adjusted, in the way their focus moved outward, in the way the space between them and her no longer felt like the center of the situation. And when she finally lifted her gaze toward the road, the lights were closer now. Steady, controlled, reflecting off the surface of the pavement in long, clean lines, vehicles moving with purpose, not speeding, not hesitating, simply arriving, and the small crowd near the pumps shifted slightly, murmurs rising just enough to break the silence that had settled, curiosity replacing tension, uncertainty giving way to something harder to define. Officer Cole lowered his radio fully now, his hand no longer hovering near it, his attention fixed on the approaching vehicles, and for the first time since the moment began, he stepped back. Not dramatically, not in retreat, but in recognition that the scene was no longer his to direct. His partner mirrored the movement, both of them standing straighter now, not as enforcers of the moment but as participants within it, and the vehicles came to a controlled stop near the edge of the station, doors opening in quiet sequence, figures stepping out with a precision that carried no urgency yet demanded attention, their presence measured, composed. The kind of presence that did not need to announce itself loudly because it was already understood. Angela watched. Without change in her expression, her calm remaining intact, not because she was unaffected, but because she had already anticipated this shift in a way that did not require surprise, her fingers still resting around the box, her posture steady, as if the center of the moment had always been within her rather than around her. One of the figures moved forward, not quickly, not slowly. Just with a clarity of direction that made space without asking for it, and Officer Cole instinctively straightened further, his shoulders tightening slightly, not in resistance but in awareness, as the distance between assumption and reality closed in a way that could no longer be ignored. The station lights cast long reflections across polished surfaces, catching the edges of uniforms, the lines of vehicles, the quiet stillness of Angela standing at the center of it all, and in that convergence of motion and silence, the truth that had been forming quietly from the beginning stepped fully into view, not spoken yet, not declared, but unmistakably present in the way every gaze shifted, in the way every movement aligned, in the way the moment itself seemed to pause once more, just long enough for everyone there to understand that nothing about what had just unfolded was ordinary, and nothing about what was about to follow would be either. The man who stepped forward did not raise his voice, did not rush, did not signal with exaggerated authority, yet the space parted for him as if it understood something before the people within it did, his uniform clean, precise, carrying insignia that caught the station lights in sharp, controlled reflections, and when he stopped a few feet from Angela, he did not look at the officers first, he looked at her, directly, fully, as if confirming something that required no introduction, no explanation, just recognition, and Angela met his gaze with the same steady calm she had carried from the beginning, no shift in posture, no change in breath, only a quiet acknowledgement that the moment had reached its turning point. The man gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, then turned his attention to Officer Cole, his expression composed, not confrontational, not emotional, simply firm in a way that left no room for interpretation. "Is this Ms. Angela Brooks?" he asked, his voice even, measured, and Cole answered immediately. "Yes, sir." The word coming out instinctively, not from rank alone but from the realization that the situation had moved beyond his scope. The man's gaze held on Cole for a second longer, not accusing, not aggressive, just steady, as if allowing the weight of the moment to settle on its own. Then he spoke again. "You will step back." And the phrasing was not loud, not forceful, but absolute, and Cole did exactly that, one step, then another, his partner following without question, the shift in control complete without a single raised tone. Angela remained where she was, the small white box still in her hands, the label now catching the light more clearly as the angle changed, and the man turned back to her, his posture softening just slightly, not in weakness but in respect. "Ma'am," he said quietly, and in that single word there was a clarity that had been missing from everything before, a recognition that redefined the entire moment without needing to explain it. The officers stood a few feet away now, their presence still but no longer central, their earlier certainty replaced by a silence that spoke more than any words could have. The small crowd near the pumps had gone completely quiet, every movement slowed, every breath held, as if the entire scene was listening. The man reached out, not to take the box, not to direct her, but to gesture gently toward the open space beside him, an invitation rather than an instruction. And Angela stepped forward, her movement calm, deliberate, her pace unchanged, as if she had never been rushed to begin with. And as she moved, the air around her seemed to shift again, not dramatically, not visibly, but in a way that everyone present could feel, the difference between assumption and truth settling into place with quiet finality. Officer Cole watched without speaking, his expression no longer guarded but reflective, as if he was replaying the moment from the beginning. Seeing it now through a different lens, one that revealed what had been missed, what had been assumed, what had been decided too quickly. And the realization did not come with noise, it came with stillness, with the absence of the certainty he had carried just minutes before. And as Angela came to a stop beside the man, the station lights cast a steady glow across them both, illuminating not just their presence but the shift that had taken place. A shift that did not need to be announced because it was already understood by everyone standing there, even if no one had yet found the words to say it. The man did not speak immediately after Angela stepped beside him, and in that silence something deeper than words settled across the station, a quiet that was not empty but full, as if every person there understood that the moment had already resolved itself even without explanation. The man turned slightly toward the officers, his posture unchanged, his presence steady, and though his voice remained calm when he finally spoke, it carried a clarity that needed no volume to be understood. "This matter is concluded," he said, not as a command but as a statement of fact, and Officer Cole nodded once, the movement small, almost restrained, yet it carried more weight than any earlier action he had taken, because this time it was not driven by assumption, it was guided by recognition. His partner followed the same quiet acknowledgement, both of them stepping further back, their earlier positions dissolving into the background of the scene, and Angela remained still for a moment longer, her gaze lowering briefly to the small white box in her hands, the label now fully visible under the steady light. Unchanged from the beginning, unchanged through everything that had unfolded, and she adjusted her grip gently, not out of tension but out of care, as if returning her focus to what had always mattered most. The man beside her noticed the motion and inclined his head slightly, a subtle gesture that did not interrupt her but aligned with her purpose, and without another word he stepped aside just enough to clear her path, not leading, not directing, simply making space. Angela moved forward then, her steps measured, calm, her pace the same as it had been before. Anything began, and as she passed the officers she did not pause, did not look back, not out of disregard but because there was nothing left in that moment for her to hold on to. The air felt different now, lighter, as if the weight that had pressed down on it earlier had lifted without needing to be announced. The small crowd slowly began to disperse, conversation starting again in low voices, not loud, not dramatic,